Kansas Territory, August 1872. The summer heat hung heavy over the Flint Hills when Callum Westley rode into the abandoned homestead, dust trailing behind his horse like smoke. He had not meant to stop. There were cattle to check on, and a fence line needing mending, but something about the quiet barn off the overgrown path caught his eye. The door was cracked open just enough to look like a whisper for help. Callum dismounted, boots crunching dry grass as he approached. The air smelled of old hay and iron. He pushed the barn door open, the hinges groaning under their own weight. At first he thought it was an animal, something shifting in the shadows, making sharp, uneven sounds. Then came the voice. "Weak, hoarse, please." Callum stepped in. The light from the door stretched across the barn floor, cutting through the dust. And there, tied to a support beam with her hands behind her back, ankles bound, was a woman. Dirt streaked her dress and her lip was split, but her eyes locked onto his with a quiet fire. He moved fast. "I'm going to get you out of here," he said, already kneeling to cut the rope around her wrists with his hunting knife. "What's your name?" "Rowena," she whispered. "Rowena Hale." Her shoulders slumped forward as soon as the ropes fell away. Callum caught her before she hit the ground. "Easy now," he said, lifting her into his arms. She flinched. I have to go back." "You are not going back anywhere," he said, voice low but firm. "You are safe now." He carried her out into the light. Her skin was pale beneath the bruises, and her breathing was shallow, but she clung to his shirt like she wanted to believe him. "Was anyone else here?" he asked, scanning the empty yard. She shook her head. "They left me, said someone would come round eventually." Her voice cracked. "I have nothing, not anymore." Callum helped her onto his buckskin horse and climbed up behind her. "You have me now." They rode east toward his ranch. It was a quiet ride, save for the wind and her occasional wince. He did not push her for answers. She had been through hell, and he could see she was holding herself together by threads. His cabin sat near a bend in the river, 2 rooms and a porch that faced the cottonwoods. He helped her down, steadying her when her knees buckled. Inside, he laid her on the cot and brought water, then an extra quilt. She drank like she had not in days. "You live alone?" she asked, voice soft. He nodded. "It is just me." "Nearest neighbor is 6 miles. She looked around, eyes taking in the walls, the books on the shelf, the rifle above the door. "This feels safe." He sat on the edge of the table, arms crossed. "You want to tell me what happened?" Her fingers tightened around the cup. "My uncle sold me." "That is what happened." She met his gaze. "Said I owed him for taking me in after my parents died. I told him I would work it off, but he had other ideas. The man he gave me to, he thought he could break me." Callum's jaw twitched. He looked away. "I fought," she said. "I would not give him what he wanted, so he tied me up and left. I thought I was going to die in that barn." He walked to the stove. The kettle was still warm from the morning. He poured more water. "You did not die," Callum said, handing her the cup again. "And you are not going back." She watched him, long and hard, eyes narrowing like she was trying to read something hidden. "Why did you stop at that barn?" "I do not know," he said honestly. "Just felt like I should." She held the cup in both hands. "You saved my life." He nodded once. "And I will keep doing it if you let me." A tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away fast. That night, she slept in his bed while he took the floor. Around midnight, she whispered his name. "Callum." He sat up. "You all right? I need to tell you something." "Before this goes any further," he frowned. "Go ahead." She hesitated, breath catching. "I am not alone," she said. "I have a daughter." The words hit like a gust of wind. "She is 3. Her name is Petaline. They took her from me 2 days ago before they threw me in that barn. I do not know where she is." Silence filled the cabin. Callum stood, walked to the foot of the bed, and crouched down to meet her eyes. "Then we will find her," he said, steady. "Whatever it takes." Rowena stared at him like she had not expected that, like no one had ever said it before. "You would do that for me. I would do anything for you." Something shifted in her then. A softening of fear, a flicker of hope. She reached out and took his hand. "You barely know me," she whispered. "I know enough," he said. "You are strong, you are brave. And you did not deserve any of what happened. That is all I need to know." Her fingers curled around his. She closed her eyes, and this time when she slept, her breathing was easy. By morning, Callum had packed a saddlebag with food, water, and ammunition. He left a note with the ranch hand in town in case anyone came looking. Rowena came out of the cabin wearing a clean shirt of his and her old skirt. Her face was still bruised, but her spine was straighter. "I will not slow you down," she said. "You are not slowing me down," he replied. "You are the reason I am riding." They set off together, side by side on horseback, heading west toward the direction she last saw her daughter taken. And as the sun rose behind them, Callum looked over and realized something had already changed. He had found her bound in a barn. He had freed her, and now, riding beside her, he understood she carried his future. They rode through the tallgrass prairie west of Council Grove, where the wind moved in long, slow sweeps, and the sky seemed to stretch wider with every mile. The trail ran faint beneath them, half lost to summer overgrowth, but Rowena kept her eyes scanning the horizon, recounting what little she remembered of the men who'd taken her girl. He was short, a slight limp in his left foot. "Wore a tan duster with missing buttons," she said, voice steady but clipped. He called the other one Mick, laughed through his teeth like he thought it made him clever. Callum's jaw tensed, but he said nothing. He let her speak as she needed, guiding his horse along the shallow creek that veered west toward the trading post at Diamond Springs. "Petaline has a small scar above her brow," she added quietly. "Fell on a wooden stool when she was 2. I always told her it made her look fierce. She sounds like her mother." Rowena gave him a glance, not sharp, but searching. "You always talk like that." "Like what?" "Like you already know me." Callum adjusted the reins. "I know what I see. And I trust what I see more than what I hear." She didn't respond, but he noticed the way her shoulders eased just a little, the tension in her jaw loosening as the land opened into a shallower valley. They reached a dry camp spot by late afternoon, where cottonwoods leaned toward the creek and the air cooled in the shade. Callum dismounted, checked the horses, then laid out a small cook fire while Rowena gathered twigs, careful to keep her pace even on the uneven ground. She sat across from him as the flames caught. Her face was drawn from the day's ride, but her eyes stayed alert, watching the fire between them. "There was a time I used to think trouble came in loud ways," she said, pulling her knees up. "Gunshots, screaming, thunder, but it doesn't. It comes quiet, like a man closing a door behind him." Callum stirred the embers gently. "You still think it's coming?" She didn't answer right away. Then, "Not the same way." He nodded once, then reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a folded map, spreading it across a flat stone. "There's a rancher named Millard south of here," he said. "Deals in stock and sometimes worse. Sheriffs warned him twice about moving livestock that ain't his. He keeps a bunkhouse folks come and go, no questions asked. Could be worth checking." Rowena leaned closer, brushing her knuckles across her brow. "If she's there, we'll get her out. I'll see to it." She watched him as though weighing the truth in his voice. "You don't hesitate. I used to." It cost too much. He didn't offer more, and she didn't press. Instead, she rose and stepped down toward the edge of the creek, kneeling to wash her hands. The water caught the copper dusk light, and he saw the quiet strength in her back as she scrubbed away the dust of the trail. When she returned, her hair was damp and her sleeves rolled. She sat close enough to share the warmth of the fire. "I learned to read on the floor of a dry goods store," she said. "Merchant's wife took pity on me, said I had too much silence in me for a child. I'd sit by the barrels of flour and trace the letters on crates till they made sense." Callum smiled faintly, keeping his eyes on the fire. "That how you got so good with words?" "I had to be," she said. "Words were all I had before I had Petaline." The fire cracked between them. He passed her a chunk of cornbread, wrapped in cloth from his rucksack. She took it, broke it slowly. "You ever think about family?" she asked. "I do now." Rowena looked up. "You mean, with me?" The pause that followed wasn't long, but it held weight. He didn't blink. "I meant what I said. I'll find your girl, after that. If you'll let me, I'd like to stay." The wind rustled through the cottonwoods above, and something in her face shifted, some burden lifted just enough to let light through. "I never thought I'd want to belong anywhere again," she said. "But I believe you when you say that. I don't know why, but I do." "You don't need to know why," Callum said. "You just need to know I'll be there." She looked at him then, really looked, and something passed between them that didn't need naming. "Not yet." She finished the cornbread and set the cloth aside. "Tomorrow," she said, "we ride south." Callum nodded, laying his rifle beside his bedroll. and as the stars came out one by one, she settled beside him in the grass, not touching, but near enough to hear his breathing. The night was quiet, but not empty. She had once thought the world was full of doors closing behind her. But now, there was a man beside her who left doors open. By mid-morning, the sun was already pressing hard against their backs. The trail south deepened into low ravines, where limestone jutted from the earth like old bones and the brush grew thick with burrs. Rowena kept her mare steady, guiding her through the gullies with a quiet focus. She hadn't spoken much since they broke camp. Callum didn't press her. He knew silence sometimes said more. They reached a limestone outcropping above a bend in the Neosho River where they could see the Millard property. A wide expanse of fenced pasture stretched beneath them, broken only by a crooked barn and a long, low bunkhouse with rusted tin roofing. A cook fire burned at the edge of the yard. Two men sat near it, one sharpening a blade, the other chewing on something from a tin. Callum dismounted and drew his rifle from its scabbard. He crouched beside a mesquite thicket, scouting through the brush. "There," Rowena said, pointing toward the side of the barn. "That wagon, it's the one they loaded me into." "I remember the blue paint chipped off the back corner." Callum narrowed his eyes. "You certain?" "Yes." A woman stepped out from the bunkhouse then, tall and loose-limbed with a scarf tied around her head. She carried a pail, walked to the well, then disappeared again. No children in sight. He adjusted the rifle strap and scanned the perimeter. "We go in careful, wait until dusk. Shadows'll give us cover." Rowena pulled her canteen from the saddle and drank. "What if they moved her? Then we find the trail," he said. "But we start here." They waited through the heat of the day beneath the trees, horses tied in the shade. Rowena kept her back against a cedar trunk, arms folded across her knees. Her fingers moved sometimes small, restless circles on the fabric of her skirt, but her face stayed still. "You ever think about what comes after?" she asked, not looking at him. Callum glanced over from where he was oiling the lever of his rifle. "After what, all this? Petaline, the men who did this, when it's done." He set the rifle down gently. "I think about building a place with you." "That's all I know for sure." She didn't answer right away. "I used to want a garden," she said finally. "Not big. Just enough for beans and maybe a patch of sweet peas. My mother used to say they were the first thing to bloom when the ground softened. Said they were stubborn like me." He leaned back on his heels. "Then we'll plant sweet peas first." The light shifted gold across the hills by the time they moved. They kept low, crossing the field in the long shadows of evening. A rail fence bordered the barn's north side. Callum signaled her to stay behind as he crept toward the slatted wall, listening for movement. He heard a faint, high voice. Then the unmistakable sound of a child's cough. He returned to Rowena, eyes sharp. "She's here." Her breath hitched, but she said nothing, only nodded once. They waited until the man sharpening the blade walked behind the bunkhouse. Callum moved first, rifle ready but angled down, boots soft on the packed earth. Rowena followed, crouched low, every step measured. Inside the barn, dust hung in the air like gauze. A rope ladder led to a loft. From above, a small voice echoed soft, rhythmic humming. Callum pointed upward. Rowena climbed first, careful not to let the boards creak. At the top, she paused, then crawled forward on her hands and knees. The child sat curled in a pile of old sacks, clutching a rag doll. Her eyes lifted slowly, uncertain. "Mama." Rowena gathered her in her arms without a word, burying her face in the girl's hair. The child clung to her, silent and shaking. Callum gave them a moment, then climbed up after, keeping watch from the opening. "We need to go now." Rowena shifted Petaline onto her hip. "She's light," she whispered. "Too light. We'll get her fed and home." They climbed down together, took the back way out through the trees. Petaline didn't speak again, but she didn't cry either. She kept her small hand fisted in her mother's collar, eyes wide, watching everything. By the time they reached the horses, the sky had gone deep purple. Callum helped Rowena into the saddle, then lifted the child to sit between them. They rode in silence, the three of them pressed close, the wind soft against their faces. Later, at a safe distance near a rocky bluff, they made camp. Callum built the fire low. Rowena fed Petaline broth from a tin pot, coaxing her with quiet tones. The child ate slowly, but she ate. Callum sat a little apart, polishing the rifle again, listening. She asked if you were my husband, Rowena said, folding the blanket around her daughter. I told her not yet. Callum looked up. Not yet, Rowena met his eyes. I want a home, Callum, not just shelter. I want steadiness. Soil and silence. I want her to grow up hearing laughter instead of slammed doors. He stood, walked to her, and knelt beside them. Then we'll build it, the three of us. She didn't speak, only leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder. For the first time in weeks, Petaline slept without stirring. And when the fire burned low and the prairie wind curled around them gentle as breath, Rowena reached for Callum's hand beneath the blanket, laced their fingers together, and held on. By the third day of riding east, the land softened. The grass grew thicker, greener, and the wind carried the scent of damp earth after a short morning rain. They followed the river bend toward Callum's homestead, avoiding the main roads. Petaline dozed in Rowena's arms as they rode, her small cheek pressed to her mother's shoulder, breath steady. Callum's cabin came into view just as the sun began to dip, casting long gold over the cottonwoods. A rabbit darted across the trail and vanished into the brush. Callum slowed his horse and looked toward the house, where the porch sat quiet and unchanged. I can't tell if it feels smaller or just more certain, Rowena said, adjusting her hold on her daughter. It's the knowing what it's for now, Callum replied. He helped them both down, then lifted a small chest from the saddlebag and carried it inside. Rowena followed, holding Petaline against her hip, the girl half awake now, head turning toward the windows and corners like she was trying to place it all. She'll need her own space, Rowena said. Doesn't have to be much, just a cot. A place for her to keep her little things. I'll build a wall to split the room, Callum said. Give her a corner with shelves and a desk if she wants one. Rowena looked over. You've thought about this before. I've had time to. That night, Petaline slept curled in the cot near the hearth, wrapped in the quilt Callum had laid out. Callum moved outside after she was settled, splitting kindling by lantern light. Rowena came out and leaned against the post, arms crossed, watching him work. I could help, she offered. You do enough, he said. I'm used to it. She tilted her head. That's the part I mean to change, he paused, axe balanced in one hand. You don't need to fix what isn't broken. I'm not here to fix anything, she said. I'm here to build something new, with you, not under you, not behind you, beside. He set the axe down. That's what I want too. A breeze passed through the trees, stirring the lantern's flame. She stepped down from the porch and walked to him. Her hand lifted, brushed a fleck of sawdust from his shoulder. There's something else I want to say, she said. Not because you need to hear it, but because I need to say it. He waited. I stopped hoping, she said, back in that barn. I told myself not to expect anything, no rescue, no kindness. I thought if I gave up hoping, I wouldn't feel the break when it didn't come. His face didn't change, but his hands flexed once, slow. But then you came, she said. You didn't ask if I deserved saving. You just did it, she stepped closer. I won't waste that, I won't waste you, he reached for her hand. You're not wasting anything, you're home. They stood in the glow of the lantern, the sound of crickets rising from the grass. She leaned in, and he met her halfway, her lips warm and certain against his. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't sudden. It was the kind of kiss that felt like it had been waiting its turn. Inside, Petaline stirred once and turned in her sleep. By morning, Callum was already outside measuring planks for the partition wall. Rowena stood barefoot on the porch with a mug between her hands, hair still damp from the river. She watched him work, eyes steady. She likes it here, she said as he marked a board. Said it smells like bread and horses. That's high praise from her. He looked up. She's welcome to every room in this house, same as you. He saw her hesitate then, a flicker of thought she hadn't said aloud yet. She's never had a man in her life who stayed, she said. Not one. I don't want her to think this is something that gets taken away. Callum set the saw aside and walked to her. Then I'll prove it. Every day, you won't have to wonder. She nodded once, slow. I'll do the same. Later, she helped him hoist the first frame of the wall, holding it steady while he hammered the nails. Her sleeves were rolled, and she laughed once when the plank slipped sideways and knocked her wrist. You sure you need this much room for a cot? She asked. She might want a reading nook, he said, or a place for her drawings. She draws stars, Rowena said. Mostly constellations. I don't know how she remembers where they go, but she does," he smiled. "We'll build her a shelf for the best ones." It was near supper when the wall stood upright, squared and braced. Callum stepped back, brushing sawdust from his knees. Rowena stood with her hands on her hips, studying it. "She has a space now," she said. "You both do." That night, with the new wall casting a fresh shadow across the cabin, they sat on the porch and watched the moon rise. Petaline slept behind the partition. A soft breeze moved through the trees, and the creek murmured in the distance. Rowena reached for Callum's hand. "This is the first time I've ever felt like tomorrow isn't something I have to brace against." He looked at her, his thumb brushing the back of her hand. "Tomorrow's ours now, all of them." She leaned her head on his shoulder. And for the first time in either of their lives, the night didn't feel like something to endure. It felt like something they got to keep. By early September, the days had cooled. The wind came down from the north with the scent of turning leaves, and the tall grass began to bronze at the edges. The garden bed Callum had dug behind the cabin waited for roots, dark and ready. Rowena stood barefoot in the soil, sleeves rolled to her elbows, Petaline humming softly as she dropped seeds into the furrows her mother made with careful hands. "She wants to name each row," Rowena said, brushing a curl from her cheek. "I told her sweet peas don't mind what they're called, so long as they're planted deep and kept warm." Callum leaned against the fence post, watching them. "Then we'll keep them warm." That evening, he found her combing the girl's hair beneath the porch lantern. Petaline sat still on a low stool, head tilted forward. Callum handed her a carved wooden box with a hinged lid. Inside, a small collection of hair ribbons, buttons, and a folded square of blue muslin. "She should have something of her own," he said, "things she doesn't have to ask for." Rowena traced the edge of the box with her thumb. "You made this." "I started it years ago." "Didn't know who it was for then." She looked at him, eyes softened by the glow. "You do now." In the weeks that followed, they built rhythm like breath. Mornings brought chores, and afternoons were for teaching Petaline her letters at the table while Callum repaired the roof. Rowena kept a journal now, bound in leather and hidden behind a loose board beneath the hearthstone. In it, she wrote small things: the color of the sky just after dawn, Petaline's new word for the cabin, stillhouse. The way Callum's hand felt steady on her lower back when he passed behind her in the kitchen. One night after the girl had fallen asleep, Rowena stepped out onto the porch where Callum sat stringing new fishing line. She settled beside him without a word, her shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders. "I saw a woman in town today," she said. "Said she knew my mother years back. Asked me if I was her girl. What did you tell her?" I said yes. For the first time in a long while, I wanted to be. Callum paused, then set the line aside. "You feel her close again," Rowena nodded. "Not like before, not like grief, it's more like. She's watching to see what I'll do next." He reached for her hand. "What do you want to do next?" She turned toward him. "I want to marry you." He blinked, then smiled soft and full, like the way the earth opens to rain. "I was hoping you'd say that before I asked." She laughed quietly, hand still in his. "You were going to ask. I've had a ring in the drawer for a week, made from an old spur and a sliver of turquoise. I want to wear it," she said. He rose, went inside, and returned with the ring wrapped in cloth. She closed her fingers around it before he could offer it proper. "I'd rather put it on myself," she said. "Feels more like a promise that way." She slid it on, then pulled him down for a kiss that lingered, unhurried and certain. They wed beneath the cottonwoods 2 days later, with a neighbor couple from across the ridge as witnesses. Petaline stood between them, holding both their hands. Her dress was too big and her boots too scuffed, but her smile lit her whole face. After the vows, they shared blackberry pie and cornbread on the porch. The sky turned lavender, and the wind rustled through the trees like it, too, was ready for something new. That night, after the girl was tucked in with her doll and quilt, Rowena stepped into the bedroom and closed the door behind her. Callum stood by the window, shirt half unbuttoned, watching the moonlight on the river. "I never imagined my life would be quiet," she said. He turned. "Do you mind it being quiet?" She walked to him, pressed her palm to his chest. "No, I crave it now. I crave you." Their wedding night was slow, not from caution but from reverence. Each touch was deliberate, each breath shared. He laid her down with care, not as someone to be claimed, but as someone finally safe to reach for. She whispered his name once, then fell silent, not from fear, but from fullness. He kissed her temple, her collarbone, the curve of her hip. She pulled him close and let the years of pain fall away, breath by breath. And when they fell asleep, limbs entwined, it was not with the wariness of those waiting for something to be taken. It was with the peace of those who had chosen each other and meant to keep doing so. Years passed, and the still house grew. Petaline built a telescope from scrap wood and lenses Callum brought back from town. She read aloud on the porch in the evenings, her voice clear and sure. Rowena kept the journal going, now filled with pressed flowers and pencil sketches, the handwriting of a girl growing into her own. Callum carved toys for traveling children who came with passing wagons. Rowena taught their mothers how to stretch flour and make warmth from whatever they had. They planted more rows, sweet peas in spring, corn in summer. Apples in fall, they danced sometimes, barefoot in the grass, no music but the wind and the sound of each other's laughter. And when the last frost came late one year, curling the edges of the stillhouse windows, Callum wrapped his arms around Rowena in bed and whispered, "I've never been more home than I am right now." She turned toward him, her hand resting over his heart. "Then let's stay right here. As long as the world lets us." He kissed her brow, her shoulder, her wedding ring. And the still house, lit by the warmth of 3 lives twined together, stayed lit for many winters to come.